Welcome back everybody, my name is Tucker, and today's video is a continuation of my NBA season preview series for the 2019-20 NBA season, and this one covers the Portland Trailblazers. The Blazers finished with a 53-29 record last season and made their 6th straight playoff appearance and made an appearance in the Western Conference Finals for the first time since 2000. And if things had stayed the same as they have been around the NBA for the last couple years, there probably wouldn't be too much optimism around this Trailblazers team being anything better or finishing any better than they did last year. But obviously, as you guys know, things are wildly different in the NBA this upcoming season, and there's no one true, clear title contender or best team in each conference, which makes the Trailblazers specifically a really intriguing team as a legitimate NBA title contender for this upcoming season. But first up, let's review their offseason, and the first addition is their first-round draft pick, Nassir Little. He is someone that throughout the year a lot of people saw as a lottery pick, extremely talented, was kind of a late bloomer in the high school scene, played at UNC, didn't play especially well all the time, was inconsistent, but has really good physical tools, is a great athlete, plays hard, you can obviously see the talent that he has as a defender, just needs to develop more offensively and drop down the draft boards as a result, and ended up going to the Blazers later in the first round. And I'm not anticipating a ton from him this season. Once we get to the depth chart, you'll see kind of where he falls, and he certainly could have a role on this team, but as many Trailblazers picks have been the last couple of seasons, he's going to be a bit more of a project just because he is so raw offensively, doesn't have a ton of skill on that end. But I do believe in the Blazers' ability to develop him, and I think it's a good thing that they got him, considering that Al-Farouq Aminu left this offseason. Again, I'm stepping on later parts of the video. That'll be talked about in the subtraction section, but I really wasn't a fan of Nassir Little in the draft simply because of where he was being picked to be drafted and being drafted so high in the lottery. But as a later first-round pick and as a bit more of a project, specifically for this Trailblazers team, I like it. Next up now in terms of additions is Anthony Tolliver, who's going to be a stretch four for this team, someone that can shoot, and that's about it. And that's definitely a hole that they have in this roster. Again, once we get to the depth chart, you'll see he's going to play an important role for this team, and as long as he makes shots, he's going to help them. He can shoot from mid-range, he can shoot from three, but again, that's about all you're going to ask from Anthony Tolliver, other than just being, kind of a big body in the paint, a bigger body in the paint, rebound a little bit. Not going to be a great defender, but at least he does provide them that floor spacing in a very specialized role. And now we get to some more interesting players in terms of additions for this Trailblazers team, and this one is going to be Hassan Whiteside. And as I'll talk about later, I'm a little bit nervous about Hassan Whiteside's introduction into this Portland Trailblazers team, specifically because even though the culture in Portland is obviously something that they've worked on and something that has been built up over the course of the last handful of years, and it shouldn't be an issue, you would also think the same thing about Miami with Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra, and he still caused issues there. But again, I'm stepping on things that I'm going to talk about later in the video. In terms of on the court, Hassan Whiteside should be good for this team, so long as they tone down some of his block chasing habits and just allow him to be a good, solid team defender and rim protector, not always chasing blocks so much. He should be good for them, score some garbage points in the paint, hopefully not try and do anything too crazy offensively. And it's important, that they got him, because Jusuf Nurkic, who was so good for them last season before he hurt his leg, is obviously going to have some troubles coming back from that injury. So having Hassan Whiteside, who is a legitimate starting center on this team, is going to be huge for them and is a good addition for them. Next up now is a player that they essentially just flipped for Evan Turner, and that is Kent Bazemore, who's a little bit more of an off-ball player than Turner is. Turner needs the ball in his hands a little bit to be a playmaker because he's not a great shooter. Bazemore isn't an outstanding shooter, but he can occasionally make shots off the ball, depending on which season you're looking at. He could be a good shooter or not a very good shooter at all, again, depending on the numbers in the season that you're looking at. Could be a solid defender for them as well, and this kind of seemed like something where they just wanted to mix something up. Both Bazemore and Turner are on big contracts. Both of them had been with their current teams for a couple of seasons, and they just wanted to change it up and see if his more off-ball approach will help them. I think he is going to be helpful for them. How much, I'm not really sure at this point. It all just depends on his shot-making ability. But again, Portland is a place that typically players improve as shooters, so I wouldn't be surprised to see Bazemore be an important rotational piece for this team. And then last up is another interesting addition, and that is Pau Gasol. I really wasn't expecting him to sign with a new team this offseason. I was thinking about him as a player that his career would just be over, but he should be able to provide them solid minutes at the backup five. Probably won't play in every game during the regular season, but will be there to help the young guys, and again, occasionally play the backup five, specifically when they're waiting on Nurkic to come back while Whiteside is starting at the five. Moving on to subtractions now, and this is a long list, so I'm going to attempt to go through it relatively quickly. An important one, first up, is Al-Farouq Aminu, who went to the Magic and has been a really good 3-and-D player for the Trailblazers for the last couple of seasons, and they are certainly going to miss him, specifically his ability to play either the 3 or the 4 spot and still space the floor and still provide good defense, especially because CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard both obviously aren't very good defenders, so you kind of have to hide them on some other guys, and Aminu's ability to guard and to defend was hugely important to this team, so they're definitely going to miss that. Next up is Seth Curry, really good shooter for them. Again, signed with a different team this offseason. He's on the Mavericks now. He really wasn't a huge part of their team during the regular season, had some good moments in the postseason. Again, just a shooting specialist, that they're going to miss on this team. Next up, Mo Harkless, kind of in the same vein as the Al-Farouq Aminu thing, but not as good of a shooter, but someone that provides a little bit more on the ball, and in my opinion isn't as important to this team as Aminu was, but they're still going to miss him as a bigger body on the wing, someone that can defend, someone that can shoot. Definitely going to miss him. Next up, Nick Stauskas, someone else just like Seth Curry, shooting specialist, can provide a little bit more than that, had some good moments, going to miss his ability to spread the floor. Meyers Leonard, a front court player that again had some really good moments in the postseason, but I caution Miami Heat fans and their season preview against getting really excited about Meyers Leonard coming in, because for the most part he wasn't a huge part of the Trailblazers rotation until he had some good moments in the playoffs. They will miss that floor spacing ability and that depth in the front court, but I'm not anticipating them missing it all that much. Next up is Enes Kanter, again, depth in the front court, someone that was really good for them at times, especially once Nurkic went down, and in the postseason, played through injury. The team really enjoyed having him there. The city really enjoyed having him there, but he decided to move on to the Celtics. And then last up is Evan Turner, who I talked about a little bit earlier in the swap with Kent Bazemore. He's someone that is a good playmaker off the bench, but just never really fit in Portland the way that they hoped that he would when they signed him to that big contract after he had success with the Celtics. His on-ball need, his need to have the ball in his hands to make plays, just never really meshed super well with CJ and Dame, but they will still miss some of that creativity that he does provide specifically off the bench. Moving on now, let's talk about the depth chart. So for me, I have Lillard, McCollum, Hood, Collins, and Whiteside as starters, and then off the bench, Simons, Hazonia, Bazemore, Little, Tolliver, Nurkic, and Gasol. In the 5 spot specifically, you can switch out Nurkic for Whiteside once he comes back and is healthy, but for now I'm anticipating Whiteside starting there, and then again, they will flip at some point. Really the biggest struggle for me was figuring out who the starting 4 was on this team, because Collins doesn't fit especially well in that role unless he makes some bigger strides as a shooter at some point. But you would have to think that because they traded away Meyers Leonard and because they let Al-Farouq Aminu walk, they have some kind of plan there because they traded for a 5-man in Hassan Whiteside. And I guess that plan is some combination of Collins and Tolliver, unless they're planning on playing smaller with 4 perimeter players around their 5, which I guess could work. You can move Hood up, maybe move Bazemore up. Little could play in either the 3 or the 4 spot, depending on how many minutes they really want to give him. But that 4 spot would definitely be a concern for me. The other concern here would be depth, specifically in the backcourt, and their reliance on younger players. Anthony Simons is a player that there has been a lot of buzz about this summer, someone that had a good summer league and apparently had a really good offseason, could potentially be a breakout player, but until we actually see that, he is definitely still a question mark. And then you're relying on players, like I said, Hazonia, Bazemore, Little, Tolliver to provide depth in those 1 through 4 spots, and that would definitely be a concern for me compared to some of the depth that Portland has had the last couple of seasons with guys like Mo Harkless and Seth Curry and Nick Stauskas, like I mentioned in the subtraction section. So they're going to need those kinds of depth players to step up and play well and be positive contributors for them if they want to reach some of the more lofty goals that have been set for them by a lot of their fans. Other than that, in terms of the front court, outside of who the starting 4 is, I really don't have that many concerns. I think they have good depth. I think Whiteside, Nurkic once he comes back, Gasol a little bit, Collins, again, assuming that he's actually a good fit at the 4, and then Tolliver as a shooter. I really don't have a ton of issues there. Again, I just don't really know who's going to start at the 4 spot. Moving on now to some players to watch, and I kind of stepped on it a little bit earlier. The first one is Anthony Simons. He's a player that really didn't play that much last year, was kind of in an interesting situation in terms of being draft eligible because he played a post-grad year at IMG, but never actually played in college. He went from high school, post-grad at IMG, and then was drafted in the first round. A talented player, clearly, but someone that we just didn't really know what we were going to get out of him, once he got to the NBA. And now that he's here, you can tell that Portland and the city of Portland and the coaching staff and that front office are very excited about what he's going to do this upcoming season. Like I said, had a good summer league, looked confident, looked good, still had some issues obviously, but he's definitely someone to keep an eye on. Like if there is ever a player to watch to put in this section, Anthony Simons is a picture-perfect example. Someone that maybe you don't 100% know a lot about, there's been some buzz about, and you definitely want to keep an eye on him as a player that could break out. I'm definitely putting Anthony Simons in that category. The other player on a negative aspect, or in terms of a negative possibility here, is Hassan Whiteside. And if there's one thing that I think could truly like ruin and torpedo this season for the Portland Trailblazers, it is the possibility of Hassan Whiteside losing his mind and causing chemistry issues on this team. And at the beginning of the season, I don't really think it's going to be an issue because he's going to be getting consistent minutes. But once Nurkic comes back and is fully healthy and is presumably the starting five, if that's the case, and then they want to give a lot of backup 5 minutes to Zach Collins, if Hassan Whiteside doesn't really have a role on this team, I could see him getting upset and causing issues similar to how he did in Portland. Now, again, like I said earlier, or excuse me, in Miami, but like I said earlier, culture shouldn't be that big of an issue for Portland, but it shouldn't have been an issue for Whiteside in Miami either. And again, he still caused some issues there. So a player to watch from a negative aspect there for Hassan Whiteside, potentially ruining the Trailblazers season simply because I don't know how much he's going to play if they want to prioritize Collins's minutes at the backup 5 and then Nurkic obviously as the starting 5. Moving on now to expectations and predictions. Expectation, pretty simple. They're going to be a playoff team. Prediction for me, I've got them at 52 to 55 wins, a top 4 seed in the Western Conference, and a threat to make the finals. I'm pretty high on the Portland Trailblazers this season, obviously because Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum are so good, but also because they've made some moves to try and improve on the margins of this roster. And as long as Jusuf Nurkic comes back and returns to that pre-injury form that he showed last year, they're going to be extremely, extremely dangerous. And I'm not going to spoil my full, conference standing season preview by telling you exactly where I have Portland, but I will tell you that I have them pretty high up in my Western Conference standings prediction, simply because, again, Dame and CJ are going to be so good as long as players like Rodney Hood and Anthony Simons and Hazonia and Bazemore and Little and Tolliver, as long as those guys, plus obviously Nurkic and Whiteside and Gasol, as long as those guys provide good depth and are solid and have good years, this team is going to be really good simply because of Dame, simply because of CJ, and again, Nurkic as well. So keep an eye on this team. I know that there are some flashier teams to talk about in the Western Conference, maybe some more exciting teams to talk about in the Western Conference. And I'm not saying that I would necessarily pick in this moment, I definitely wouldn't pick in this moment the Portland Trailblazers to end up making the finals this season. Again, just think about them a little bit more than maybe you are to this point. I feel like a lot of people are sleeping on them as a true title contender, as a true Western Conference Finals contender. And again, just keep an eye on them. I am higher on them than really I thought that I would be, and I think most people are. But that is going to be the end of today's video. Once again, thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Tucker. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you missed any of my previous videos, any season previews, anything like that, any of the other videos I've done in the past, then please be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.